It's not a problem. I'll find my way out. At the beginning of this conference, the gold price was so high, I didn't dare to use a bar of gold as a picture. So instead I used the goldfish instead. It was a bit cheaper. In the meantime, I believe gold has come down a bit. That as a way of introduction. But what I'll be doing is visualizing the quite abstract theory, and I'll put a picture to it. If you're interested in getting the slides, I will send them to you. If you give me your email address, I'll make a PDF printout of this. I'll try to actually recover the full version. And in the meantime, we'll get along with the normal presentation. Now, what we've seen so far, in fact, are the sources of interest. We have covered the phenomenons of hoarding and dishoarding, which come into the picture when discussing interest. We have discussed the phenomenon of marginal hoarding. We have also seen something about marketability and saleability of goods. And very importantly, the marginal utility of gold and silver that fit in with this marketability and saleability. Further, we also discussed this the propensity to hoard and what effect it has on interest rates, and how we can reduce this phenomenon of interest to its irreducible form of credit. Now,
Peter?
yes?
What do you mean by that last point?
I'll come to that. Let me start from the top, because I'll take you again through what we've seen. I don't have notes on this backup. Let me see if I can back up here as well. And I'm looking for a chart. And you know what? I'll make a new one. I'll just make a new one here. When speaking about utility, we are talking abstract about something that is only ordinal, not cardinal. You cannot put figures to that. 1, 2, 3. No. You rank them. That is what we've seen in the beginning. You cannot make it a continuous function. It is always discrete. So, in coming to this irreducible form of credit, we have to go through hoarding and dishoarding. We have spoken about the annuitant with a D and a T, how they can in fact save, work and save a little bit, and then later on, when they're old enough, dishoard whatever they have saved at a certain rate and hope that it's enough. We've also seen later on that you can improve that process by using, let's say, the vertical division, the horizontal division of labor, which cannot be used without a certain remuneration. These people are in fact looking for an income in exchange for future wealth. Everything is an exchange process, as we've seen. Now, what we've also seen is the marginal utility of normal commodities, let's say grains or perishables of beans. How many bags of beans can you store, or are you willing to store? Well, in a function of quantity, and here we express marginal utility. We should be making points. We shouldn't be making a line. but we're not going to make it too difficult here. And you can see that after a certain number of beans, you've had enough and it goes negative. To you, it's not important anymore. However, if you find that other commodity that other people are looking for, which doesn't perish, and of which you don't say after a point, well, I've had enough, we've come to the conclusion that gold and silver are, for all intents and purposes, not declining that fast. Of course, they are declining. And again, we should be saying this is ordinal, we should rank it. It's in fact points, discrete points. But let's not nitpick about this. Silver would be below here and gold a bit higher because it is slightly more horrible and this is more silver is more saleable. That far, everybody has followed, I think. But of course, before they drop to zero, we are way off chart. And you can see that for all intents and purposes, this is going to be constant. Now, of course, imagine you King Midas. At one stage, you have all the gold. Then your marginal utility is probably there. You are the only person to have all the gold in the world and nobody else has. Well, then you have no use for any other unit of gold. But you know, you're living in an imaginary world. It's never going to happen. What else should we say here? Marketability, saleability. Well, of course, we have seen a chart of a diagonal price quantity equilibrium. Well, everybody's aware of how that looks. I'll make just a small one here. It looks like this. And you express price and quantity, and equilibrium is so-called at the intersection. Now, that may go for very simple things. We're not going to discuss that very much, but in most processes, it's a process of conversions. And here we see that the Mengerian approach of this equilibrium would be a lot more insightful, let's say. Once again, we have a number of quantities, and this may be an abstract price, but you always have the higher ask and the lower bid. And it's always like that. Don't make it like the bid is higher than the ask. It's never, I mean, you can if you are a lunatic. But let's speak about normal people. We have seen that this is the commercial range. The commercial range being defined as the price at which both people who are, well, both rolls the ask and the bid roll, or the offer and the seller, can actually, for any quantity within the commercial range, get along without haggling. He doesn't have to haggle, and this one neither. But of course, outside of this commercial range, prices diverge, and you have to maybe haggle. We've also seen, now this is maybe material from last year in was it Budapest or was it Szombathely?
Yes.
What determines the upper limit here of the ask and of the bid? Well, who is in charge here? What determines the upper limit is the outcome of the marginal. Anyone? Marginal buyer, the bidder. And inversely, well, do I need to explain that, or is anybody with me? I mean, this, let me just in the 3 seconds. If price goes up, the purchaser of whatever commodity is on offer here, and the price at the next uptick, he says, "Well, sorry, I'm out. I'm going somewhere else." So that's the marginal buyer, and that's when he decides he's no longer interested. So that will be the last price uptick. And of course, on the other side, that's a different process, by the way, because this person here has the ability to do some horizontal arbitrage. He goes elsewhere. The bid price, funnily enough, is determined by the producers. Sorry?
Marginal seller.
Yes, the marginal seller, which is the producer of whatever is on sale here. And he can say, well, if price is this, forget it, I'm not in. So this is the outcome of the sellers, and they have also some arbitrage to do. So that was in a nutshell something of last year. You can apply this to interest rates as well, we've seen. In the case under a gold standard, this would be a lot more complicated because there's a little bit more to it. And we'll go through that as well, because then we arrive at the propensity to hold, because we have to explain still, and we've seen that here, that even if you are under a gold standard, people still save some money in gold. So if your marginal utility of gold is constant, why do you still want more? Because you can get everything you want. Why still save? What is the limit there to saving? And we've come to the conclusion that it must be something else than marginal utility, because, if it is marginal utility, then it would be infinite. I would be saving as much as I can. And as much as I can carry, that may be limited to whatever. How much can you carry in gold? 50, 60 kilos? Not 200 tons. So something is stopping that, and we've seen, or we have to come to the conclusion, that even under a gold standard people do save, but not to infinity. So it must be something else that limits that, and that is interest. Interest, of course, payable in gold. And interest is not payable under a gold standard in little notes, because that would be indeed, as the professor says, a cruel joke. And in coming to the hexagonal model, we have to accept that there is a propensity to hoard gold, other stuff, but with a limit, and that it will be the interest rate, and that is, when you speak about interest rates, we've seen also that is linked to, trust somehow. You need to trust other people. They put their signature under a little piece of paper that says, okay, I am liable to you to pay you every year this much. You need to trust that person. If you can trust that person, are you loaning him something? Probably you are. You want your capital back plus a bit of interest. You trusting that person, that trust, you can call just as well credit. You give him credit for that, and for such an amount. And that would be the entrepreneur. We have briefly discussed that this model of lenders of funds and borrowers of funds is in fact totally inadequate, because there's much more roles involved than just lending and borrowing. Lending and borrowing can be found way back. If you look at Roman law, the Romans had laws against usury, but also for lending. If you borrow a ladder from your neighbor, you return that ladder, preferably in good condition. And if you borrow money, you are entitled to get that. Now, if you lend money, you're entitled from the borrower to get that money back. Even in the time of King Hammurabi, 2,500 years, in the Sumerian laws, you still find laws that treat lending and borrowing. So lending and borrowing is something that is human. As long as there is peace and confidence, you can borrow something, you can lend something as long as you give it back. So that is a quite natural process. but it's not explained by a diagonal model at all. So we've come to this construction of the square model. Now the professor has made a drawing here, and I'm going to redo that on the big screen. There are 4 corners, one with the Inuitant with a D, the one with a T. Now you may notice that I have turned a little bit because I didn't put them here on the left hand side. I turned a little bit. There is a reason for that, because later on I'm going to put an axis on this, and this will be my time axis. Here my time axis was here. I find it for myself a bit more, it's quite personal. It's just so that you understand. But you cannot replace, for instance, the Inuit and put them here at any corner. You can't do that. Huh? Please do that. Please note. Huh? You have to put them here next to each other. We have also seen there is an entrepreneur and there is an inventor. And you have to put them in this order. The Inuitant with the inventor. This is the older person, and you have to put him together with the entrepreneur because they form partnerships. You can form a partnership this way, that way, and you could form cross partnerships too. Now, let me sit down so you can all see what is the role here. The Inuitant with a D is a younger person. He's got lots of energy still, so he's long income. He can produce a little bit more surplus for himself. He's long income, present income, but he's short a bit of future wealth. He would like to get future wealth, get as wealthy as his grandfather, and preferably even faster than his grandfather. So he's short future wealth. Grandfather, on the other hand, he is short of income. He's got enough wealth. So he needs to convert that process. We have seen that it is the conversion process that is crucial in this whole story, and not just price and quantity equilibrium. That is insufficient to explain things. The role of the inventor is slightly different. What is his position? Well, he needs income. He's short. No, sorry. He needs present income. And what is he long of? He's long future wealth. The entrepreneur needs wealth in order to convert that to income. It will be future income, whereas here on this axis we see present wealth, and there it is future wealth. We've also seen... is everybody still with me? Yes? You get copies of this. Okay, no questions here so far?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Excellent. The partnerships. This is a partnership to form future wealth. It's called the partnership to form R&D. And on the other hand, that would be a partnership to form capital. Now, this is where I don't know what my slides will do. Okay, I have an idea. You can divide that. These are just roles. On the left-hand side, this partnership. On the right-hand side, that partnership, as I've just explained. You can still divide it up. Into other partnerships. Let's see what the next slide says now. What have we got here? Both the annuitant on the time axis and the older and the younger person, they form a partnership to supply credit. If they go into an agreement, they find each other. This is grandfather and this is father. That's son. possibly. But they can exchange, they can enter into an exchange, possibly even at zero credit, because grandfather can say, well, I'm sick and tired of this bakery, I'm too old to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you do it. You can use my capital equipment, which means here we have an exchange of wealth. But then you go ahead and do the bakery at 2 o'clock in the morning so I can go to sleep and watch television at night, whatever he wants to do. So he uses the equipment of his father or grandfather. So there's an exchange here. You can do you can see that an exchange of wealth and income, as it was described. But this is also a partnership to supply credit, because grandfather gets credit that he leaves his bakery to his son, and his son that son has children, and they may be employed as inventors or entrepreneurs or whatever, you know. What other partnership is there? Well, there's a partnership to utilize this credit. Okay, now before you say, Peter, this is the same thing as this, you know. Supply of credit and usability of credit. Yes, I agree. But where's the exchange of wealth? That is visible here. The exchange of wealth and income is visible on this chart, on this model, where it is not visible on this simple model. That is the point that was made. And of course we have a line. I've drawn a line here so you can see that there is a difference. There's many forms and partnerships that you can make. We've also seen there is an improvement possible with the addition of the capitalist in the pentagonal model. Once again, we start from the square model. We start there, and now I've drawn 2 arrows so you can see that the other people can also have partnerships with each other, in the understanding that these are direct partnerships, of course. You have to find your partner. What was explicitly said also is that the bargaining position of these people is asymmetric. And that becomes very clear when I draw an axis with interest on that side. Because in the absence of any interest, or call that a remuneration for their effort, both the entrepreneur and the inventor will be out of work. They cannot convert without credit any income into future wealth. They need credit, they need that, absolutely. Which makes this partnership dominant, because they can set the interest rates, if you like. Except if we enter the capitalist. Because what does he do? He improves the process. He's a go-between. And I've put him on this side instead of on the other model that the professor has drawn. Now it's not saying that you are wrong. I've just preferred a different position. The capitalist in this picture that you've drawn yesterday was drawn here on the side of the annuitant. This partnership has capital, obviously. I've drawn the capitalist above here. And the reason why I've done that is that he is the inventor and the entrepreneur are long future wealth and short income, and so the capitalist is in fact also long future wealth. He doesn't need necessarily short of income, I wouldn't say that, but he's long future wealth. So that's my interpretation. It's not wrong to put him here either, because he's also long capital. just a matter of convenience, because with my slide I have to arrive at something else now. It's good, I've got your attention. That's why is the capitalist so important? Well, he reduces the rate of interest to the lowest possible level. He finds, he's in fact a specialist. And he says, well, he's breaking the monopoly and reducing the interest rates. Why is that? Well, the troika of the inventor, the capitalist and the entrepreneur can now better bargain. In fact, if you cannot find a partnership directly between entrepreneur and annuitant, or inventor and annuitant, the capitalist has a role for that marginal inventor or entrepreneur who just missed his chance to find a partner. The capitalist will enter. On his books are lots of annuitants who have also missed their chance to find and to team up with an entrepreneur, and he will match them as far as possible. So those inventors and those role models here who have missed their chance are now given a chance exactly by the capitalist. So it's positive, and it is a positive role, instead of what you sometimes read in literature, especially social literature. You know, the role of capitalists is a dirty role. Look at. Well, I'll give you an example. Keynes wrote his general theory of interests and what was it? And labor. If you look that up, if you ever bothered to read Keynes, just look for the chapter on interest and have a good laugh. Because he describes interest formation, well, he doesn't even describe it very well, but he just plays down the role of the capitalist as a coupon clipper, as a rentier, somebody who is parasitical, he just never wants to work. Okay, but that's déjà vu. That is, that's a chapter that he's taken over from Marxist literature from 50 years before, probably. Nothing new. And in fact, it's surprising that he didn't have any of his own ideas there. We need still to arrive at the sixth protagonist, which would be the investment banker. That would complete our model, because without him, there's still something missing, and I put him here with the annuitant, because now this investment banker may be a conglomerate of a few capitalists, but also a number, maybe 200, 300 annuitants who buy shares in his company. So this investment banker is just a role, and he is prepared to take on each and every corner, and he's the matchmaker. He's got to match duration and specialty and productivity. If this one wants 3.5 and another one wants 3.25, well, he's going to matchmake them. So the roles are still improved. Okay, now due to time concerns and the time that we have a bit lost in the beginning, I'm going to go a bit faster. You have all seen this yesterday, so my visualization of the hexagonal model is as in yesterday. But please allow me to make one personal improvement. And that would be this. On the other slides it's even better explained, because on the other slides I've drawn a triangle between this troika and also this troika. We have two of them. So this, you can imagine there are two triangles. So they come from here, and I've moved them down. Why? Because we have a ceiling and a floor rate of interest. And that process of formation of interest, we know, we've seen. It's not a matter of demand and supply, but it's something else that determines this. Right? What determines that? Well, the ceiling is determined by the marginal productivity of capital. Those who've been to Zombate 2 or 3 years ago remember this, because we have seen this. Why is it that the marginal productivity of capital determines the ceiling? Anybody? Yes, Keith.
You can't borrow money at 10% in order to make a 9% profit.
Yes, that too, but of course it would be a definition of the marginal
the marginal profit is 9%.
So you cannot...
That person withdraws his bid.
Yes.
At that point.
Now I must admit, in my other notes that have disappeared, I have written it down, which I copied from the professor's notes, and it's nicely there. I'm going to have to explain this in my own words, and Keith has mentioned it already. There is a ceiling to this rate of interest. Now, I've just mentioned here that the capitalist brings this down as much as he can, this interest rate, because he is now a go-between. He can bring down the rates. There is now a bit of competition. He brings in all the partners. Interest rates are down. Why is the capitalist here whilst the floor is there? Can you see there's an inverse role here? Just as here, by the way, in the other chart. You cannot. You have to see, in fact, a bit more of the lectures before we arrive there. So maybe I should. I'm going to skip this because the professor will actually go through this in detail. I think still. Aren't you going to? Yes, sir. And due to time concerns, we've only got 10 minutes left. I'm going to come back to this after the coffee break. And we'll see this again in complete detail. But I'm going to finish this model here. The floor rate of interest is under a gold standard, that is, determined by the time preference. Not the liquidity preference. Time preference, and it's dominant. It's a dominant rate. It will not be broken down, and there's a specific reason for that, because these savers, the people who put in money and saved it with the investment banker, are perfectly able to see when, okay, this interest rate is too low, fine, thank you very much, I'm withdrawing my money from the bank. This is no good to me, I want a higher interest, I can't get it from him. Will withdraw it. He will, in fact, do some arbitrage between the cash and the gold bond market. So from the gold bond market, all those participants here, note, not a single government employee determines this rate. If the rate goes too low, they just walk away. They let their feet do the walking and the talking. If the rate needs to go up, then the bankers will have to decide, well, maybe the offered rate is a bit, we need to hire this up, otherwise we will not be able to attract money. That's why this time preference is dominant. That one isn't. The marginal productivity of capital, that is in fact quite another chapter all by itself. But you can see that when when the entrepreneur here sees that he has in fact a capital structure and it returns to him 15%. And the rate of interest goes higher than 15%. Why is that a ceiling? Well, the entrepreneur says, well, why should I get grey hair and get tired? I can just as well go to the bond market and go elsewhere instead of doing this whole entrepreneurship. So he gets out of the bonds, sells his bonds. Is that clear?
No, he buys the bonds, he sells his own company, right?
Excuse me. Yes, you're right. He's buying. He's doing some arbitrage between his own company and another market which pays more than what he gets here. So he's out of, he says, well, I've had enough. At this rate, I can just as well do something else because I'm out. That's why this is the ceiling. And this is the floor, this one is down. Any questions so far?
I just want to throw a comment. That is a
Sure.
nice model.
Yeah.
You can see that the investment banker lowers the floor because if he wasn't there, it would take more interest to do this. And same thing with the capitalist. So overall, the whole efficiency of the economy increases. And businesses that could not be viable before, but don't earn enough interest, enough return to get up there, because those two lines are lower, they come into play.
Yes.
So it's, it's nice.
I've mentioned yesterday the name of a traditional economist by the name of Pareto. In English, maybe pronounced Pareto. I think he was Italian, wasn't it? No?
Yes.
He was Italian. So what would the Italians call him? Pareto. Yeah. But he's a classical economist with an equilibrium history. So he tried to define what is optimal. And optimal in his eyes would be, okay, without defrauding anybody and without taking anything from anybody else, we can still optimize this process. Now, okay, he didn't mean this process because he was looking at an equilibrium process. But the hexagonal model shows a lot of implications. It shows a lot more than just who is the protagonist and who's determining what here. The hexagonal model shows that optimal efficiency in our world can be achieved if everybody's role is well known. Yes, the investment banker has a role. And certain laws need to control that a little bit. We have said yesterday why that is, because you have to distinguish between commercial banking, which is in the short market, and they can have in their asset portfolio probably a lot of real bills, 90 days maturity maximum. That's not the same as the investment banker. He's not interested in 90-day bills. That's too short. I mean, he's a mortgage broker, 30 years from now. So he's long, future wealth. You see? And he's matchmaking that with somebody who's short. And by arbitrage, and I didn't say speculation, by putting himself between the offers and the sellers, and he buys at the lowest offer and sells at the highest bid, he can make for himself an income. Do you see that? That arbitrage is an income and not speculation? Because this is under a gold standard. Now, I have to admit that in my other slides I have swapped these to give you an example of what happens under a irredeemable currency. We only have 3-4 minutes, but the irredeemable currency we'll see after the coffee break, and there's lots of things wrong with that. I will just want to end here that, of course, on this graph, which is my personal interpretation, I've put here the time, because there is a time preference. I've put here a rate of interest, but you could, I think, put also some kind of measure of productivity with a limit, because productivity is not limitless, neither is time. For humans, that is. Time is limited in itself. So there is a limit to ceiling and floor interest rates, there's a limit to productivity as well. One more little comment is this. If the spread between these rates is high or widens, that's a sign of something is not kosher. It means there may be a lot of obligations or bonds coming into the market which are substandard. It also means that there is something hampering the process of arbitrage. Most of the time it would happen on the taxation side. Because if you tax people, they have less income, which is this side. They have less income disposable. So taxing them would hamper the process of finding partnerships between inventor and annuitant. Because you're taking the excess income and taxing it and spending it. That's the government's role. Oh, mind you, when that is not enough, they go on to capital gains taxation and withholding tax. And when that is not enough, they have another taxation called VAT.
Or estate tax.
And estate taxes. So the process is obviously hampered, which you can see from this model, not from an equilibrium model. Because then you need to draw all sorts of funny lines, which we're not going to do. But as you can see, the role of taxation is visible here. You're hampering the process, you're widening the spread. And I think that is all time we have for now. Yes, Rudy, one question?
Just the left line, that I return, and the lower, it translates from interest return.
I for interest, but it could just as well be a Y for yield.
If it's income, it's okay.
Yes. But what I wanted to show that this hexagonal model can be made into a two-dimensional representation of both time and interest rates or yield or productivity. Not limitless productivity, because that would mean that you heighten this interest rate and push up productivity until the sky, which cannot be done, of course. Right, that's all we have time for, but we'll continue after the break. 15 minutes.